anything
This
that's on the
conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Does that mean it's 3 o'clock? No.
pretty
No.
close, 5 till.
5 till.
Roy has to go around the corner to turn that on, so.
Who is Lago, guys?
That's Letha guy.
Ah, okay.
Aaron, do you know if everybody got sworn in today?
I don't know. I'm not the one who swears folks in, so.
I know
But
it was a word went out like on January 2nd and so all the new folks would have had to get sworn in today.
Mhm.
I don't know whether the old folks need to have be resworn, but I was able to get it done, but I wasn't sure anybody else got it done.
I got it done.
I
Good.
communicated with somebody else last week about it, and they were going to make arrangements to come in and have either Robin or Sandra do it today.
Yeah. Yeah, I had gotten a email from Roy on the 2nd at 8 o'clock at night, which didn't do a lot of good, but I have a notary here at home, so I can swear all the time.
And we have 8 members now. Is that correct? Since with the new appointments?
You should.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. We have 8 appointed members now.
Great. I was just trying to count how many we had signed in so far. Like we're still missing one person.
Roy, do you know if Diane got sworn in?
I have not heard an email or seen an email on that. Everybody else, I saw an exchange flying by. I haven't noticed anything from her. I can go ask Sandra real quick though.
3 minutes.
What about Howard? Do we no longer have Howard?
I think you still have Howard, don't you?
Well, I have a list somewhere. Let me find it.
Yeah, Roy updated the website, so it should all be there.
But he's not, I mean, he's not
Yeah,
on,
Howard's still on. So,
yeah, and he's not on our group
He's
yet.
not-
no, he's the
Yeah,
one
he
that's
hasn't
missing.
signed in yet.
Let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8.
Maybe Howard is caller 1.
Yeah, Sandra says she is sworn in.
Okay.
That means everybody got it done.
That's good.
Hello, this is Ashley Porter. I'm going to merge in my husband, so I don't know how that's going to work, but I'm going to try to merge him in real quick. We're the property owners for the event.
Okay. Well, have we heard anything from Howard, or that he might not be here or anything?
Joey, are you in here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Howard says he needs the link. Apparently, he finds the internet challenging.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah, we can all kind of understand that. Oh, there he is. Well, it looks like we have everybody here.
Well, where is he?
H
Oh,
down
yeah, there he is. Oh, okay. Hi, Howard.
Hey, what's happening? Where's my camera? Oh, there I am.
Recorded.
We're getting a lot of feedback from somebody, so if y'all would just mute unless you're talking, that would be good. So it looks like we have a full board, so we'll call the meeting to order. It is 3 o'clock, straight up by my watch. And in accordance with the Open Meetings Act, the board is prohibited from acting or discussing, other than any factual responses to specific questions, any items not on the agenda. However, if you have a matter that you would like for us to hear or consider for a future agenda item, I'll open it up for that now. Is our, oh, there's Charlene. Okay, the first item on the, I don't hear any responses, so we'll just move forward. The first item on the agenda is consideration of the minutes from the meeting from November the 2nd. And I know some of the new members were not at that meeting, but I'm hoping that all of you that were, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think we have at least 5 people that were at that meeting. Hopefully you received those minutes and have read them, and any corrections you've
I have no correction. It was somebody different must have typed the minutes because they were like a book this time.
well, I think that was a long meeting. So
That's right. Oh, that's right. It was a really long meeting. Yeah, that's right.
yeah, I think
I
that
was
was
like, wow.
yeah. So
Okay.
were there any corrections that we needed to make? If not, then I guess we just need a motion to accept them as written.
I'll make a motion, we accept the minutes as written.
Thank you, Jim.
A
Do you have a
second.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Welcome all you new people there. Let's see, we've got Rob Durbin and Suzanne Graver and Paul Robertson on the, let's see, who else is new? Oh, Deanne.
Diane is here. Yes, and I apologize again. I cannot get my camera to come on. So apologies. I'm still working on it, but it won't come on for me.
So it's
But I'm here.
pronounced Diane, not Deanne?
Correct, Diane. Chanyu
Oh,
Pen.
thank you. Well, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
The next item is election of officers. So we need nominations for chair and vice chair for the upcoming year.
Freth, if I might, can I suggest that everybody who's on the board take a couple of minutes to introduce themselves and maybe provide a little bit of information about their backgrounds? That might help in the board determining who they might want to nominate for the positions.
Sure, that would be beneficial. So I'll start. My name is Freth Carroll. This is my, I think, second or third term on this board. I'm the past chairperson until someone else is elected. I've been in Lago Vista since 2007, and I'm happy to serve the community in this capacity. I'm a retired surgical nurse, so for like 42 years. So whoever wants to go next, just speak up.
I'll go.
Okay. Amadeo?
My name's Amadeo Perez. We moved here to Lago Vista in January of 2018. I'm a retired construction company executive, and I've been on this board for a year. This will be my second term coming up, and that's it. Next.
Can't see me, but hello, everybody.
Hi,
My name is Diane Chun. Hi, and I have we owned we owned property here in Lago in since 2012, and now it's me. And I did run for city council last year, and I am long time worked in, I started out in the military and the medical field. I was a corpsman in the Navy, and then I segued into the oil and gas business, working in the oil and gas business for 20 some years, and then was co-owner of an oil and gas completion services business from which I retired and divorced from. So kind of the gist of me.
Diane, I didn't catch your last name.
Chun Yu Pen. It's written on my thingy. Just don't look at it when you pronounce it. It looks a little bit. There's a bit of a difference between the pronunciation and the spelling.
Thank you, Diane. Jim,
Okay.
did you want to go next?
I'm Jim Kaysen. I retired here in 2014 after a 40-year career in the oil and gas business. I did a lot of regulatory compliance, dealing with federal code and state code and in some cases municipal code, and a lot of environmental work.
Thank you, Jim. Linda, did you want to say something else? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Okay, I'm Linda Aird. I've been on the board for 3 or 4 years. I retired here in 2014, and my career was with a title insurance underwriter, and so I did a lot of property underwriting, title insurance underwriting, and worked on joint ventures between title underwriting and savings and loan associations and title underwriting and banks. I was in the retail end of the title insurance underwriting business.
Thank you, Linda. Go ahead, Howard.
All right. Yeah, my name is Howard Hoover. Spent 10 years in the Marine Corps and then went to use aircraft and Raytheon and basically served the military doing training and technical publications as a project manager. The last 5 years I was there. So yeah, and I have a PhD in education and a master's in education and a bachelor's in behavioral science. So I will tell all you, take a lap.
Who's next?
I'll take a shot.
All right.
I'm Rob Durbin. My wife and I moved here from Houston in 2002. We've been here ever since. I have done volunteer work for the city since 2010. I served 2.5 terms on the building committee. I was in the middle of in my second term on the Board of Adjustments and was the chairman when I was appointed municipal judge here in Lago Vista. I served 2 terms as municipal judge until well, never mind. But till December of 2019, and I also ran for city council. And I've been appointed back to this board, which is kind of my favorite. It's really the only board that's mentioned in the Texas Constitution in cities. So this is my favorite one to be on. So, and I was glad that Shalane put my name up. Thank you, Shalane. And I'm happy to be here and help however I can.
Suzanne?
Okay, I'm Suzanne Griever. I've been in Lago Vista for about 3 years now. I have a 20+ year career in healthcare, in executive healthcare leadership roles, predominantly hospitals and surgical center management, which included construction, compliance work, working with local communities. So this will be my first time serving in a volunteer role like this. So I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, that's my basic information.
Great. Did we miss anybody?
Freth, did you want me to just briefly introduce myself?
Sure, go ahead.
So I'm Shalane Marion. I'm the city council liaison. I am not a voting member of the board. I'm really just here to answer questions if you might have any, maybe occasionally to pipe up on something, but I'm also here to carry anything that you would like for me to take to city council or anything from city council back to you all. But my background has all been in education. So I have been a classroom teacher, a campus assistant principal, and now I'm a director of reading and language arts at the Texas Education Agency. But I have a lot of experience working with law and rule, and much of my job requires that I read and interpret law and rule and help constituents understand what the law and rule is and how to ensure compliance with it. So I am really excited to be a part of this board. As Rob mentioned, this is an incredibly important board, so I am just happy to be here and happy to serve however you might need for me to do so. Thank you all for being here and for serving.
Thanks, Charlene. Did we miss anybody?
Just Aaron.
Just Aaron.
Yeah.
She's not an official board member, but she's very important.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Erin Silvera. I'm your city attorney. And so if at any point the board members need legal advice, there are kind of two ways to get that. One is you can ask me directly, or if it's something you feel like would be important to receive that legal advice in executive session, then you can ask the chair that y'all retire into executive session so that you can ask me those questions. I can provide you the necessary legal advice. Otherwise, this is not my meeting. This is your meeting. So I'll be happy to help you in any way I can. But you guys have to do the heavy lifting.
Thanks, Aaron.
I see that Roy is also on.
Dan had to mute.
I am here.
Can you hear them?
I can hear them, yes.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry. Yeah, my name's Roy Jambor. I'm the Director of Development Services Director. I'm an architect and a certified planner by training and education, and I've been doing this for a lot longer than I like to think. I kind of grew up in the construction industry and I'm still wondering why they pay me to do this, because it's kind of fun, but it's all I've ever done.
Thanks, Roy. So now that everybody's sort of met everybody else, since we have so many new people, we'll get back to election of officers. So we need a chair and a vice chair. So I'll open it up for nominations.
Freth, would you be open to serving again as the chair?
And y'all can self-nominate too.
I would. Not that
I nominate Fred for chair.
not that I really want to, but I would.
Well, maybe Rob would like to be chair since he's been it before, and that would give Freth a break. Rob has got experience.
I'm very willing to do that. And I did forget to mention, I'm an attorney and been an attorney for 33 years. Also in the oil and gas business. We have a lot of oil and gas and medical folks on this panel. But as far as that goes, I'm going to defer to Aaron when it comes to municipal law in most cases. But I would be willing to serve as chair. There is some perspective you get from having been chair and been on this board, and then being away for a while, and then watching some of the meetings and things. And there are some things that I think we can do that might make the meetings more efficient. I know nobody wants to be in these meetings as long as some of them go, and I do have some ideas that might help that and may help clarify some of our rulings as well. But I'm willing to do it if no hesitation. Thank you, Linda.
So can I make a motion and nominate a chair and a vice chair in the same motion? Okay, well, I'd like to
You're on
nominate.
mute, Freth.
Huh?
I think
I'd
you
like to-
can.
Okay. Well, then I would like to nominate Rob as chair and Freth as vice chair.
Second that.
All in favor? I guess do we need to do a roll call, Aaron, or can we just do a show of hands? I can see everybody, I think, except.
You can do a show of hands. I don't know that the public's going to have any particular input to provide you, but the way that the laws read, you have to allow for public input on every agenda item. So might call for that first, and then you can have your vote.
Okay. Is there any other input or discussion that needs to take place? Paul.
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you for recognizing me. I would just like to say that I think Robert Durbin would be an excellent choice for chair. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who was that?
Paul Robert.
Okay.
Interested party.
Okay.
Okay, if there are no other comments or discussion, I guess we're ready for a vote. So all those in favor of Rob Durbin being chair and myself being vice chair, raise your hand in front of your screen or something.
Do we
Diane is
abstain
aye.
ourselves?
Thank you, Diane.
Thank
It looks like it's unanimous. Were there any opposed that I missed? No. Okay. So this is by a unanimous vote. So Rob Durbin, I will turn it over to you. And the next item on the agenda is, I don't know if you have a copy of the agenda in front of you. Okay,
I do.
great.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's comments from the council liaison, and take it away.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I don't know that I really have any other comments other than, again, to welcome everyone to this new iteration of the Board of Adjustment. Again, I am very thankful to all of you who chose to return on this board and those of you who are joining us for the first time. So, like I said, I'm just here to support you all however I can and look forward to continuing to work with you. So, and other than that, I don't think I have any comments for today. Thank you.
Okay. Never taken over in the middle of a meeting before. Thank you, all of you, and I'll try to do my best and keep this committee rolling along. Okay, the next item on the agenda is item number 20-1733, zoning variance -ZON-VAR, excuse me. Application for a variance granting relief from the requirements of section 22, chapter 14 of the Lago Vista Code of Ordinances to allow portions of an existing type E wood fence, wood privacy fence, which apparently was built without a permit, to remain 8 feet in height at 21611 Coyote Trail in the Barkay Ranches, Plat 3, Lot 3041A. Roy, can we hear your presentation, please?
Yes, sir. Hopefully I've covered everything that in advance to keep this meeting as short as possible in the staff report, the relevant facts. In summary, I might mention that the portions of the fence that are 8 feet in height are only on the side. They're not as prominently in view as they might be had they been on the front. If you have any other questions about anything I put in the staff report, please ask away. The intent was to raise those questions for you, not to answer them.
I understand. I have one question. Do you know when the fence was built?
No, sir. All I can tell you is when we cited it.
Okay. How long ago was that?
November 5th is when we issued the notification for the citation.
Was there a permit to build the fence at all?
No, no. In fact, I'm not quite sure that we have the permit yet. We have the transmittal of the fee, I believe, but we don't actually have the permit application in front of us. I guess they're waiting till after that's disposed of in this meeting.
Okay. All right. Any other council members have any questions for Roy? Mr. Kaysen.
Yeah, Roy, looking at the section on relevant provisions and considerations at the third corky dot or bullet, I guess, you talk about the property being located within the R-1M zoning district where many of the more stringent appearance-based requirements are relaxed.
Yes, sir.
I mean, is that a valid reason to grant? Is this, how widespread is this? I mean, or do we just say?
I'll give you examples. Enclosed garages are required in all districts. They're not required in the R1M district. That's an example.
Is that codified?
I'm sorry?
Is that codified? Is that part
Yes,
of the?
Absolutely.
Okay, but the appearance requirements are not part of the code. They're just general acceptance or what?
No, that there are some, what I'm getting at is there are requirements that are distinct in every zoning district. There are many requirements that exist in all the other R1 zoning districts that don't exist in the R1M.
Okay, so
And,
so
and many of them are based on appearances.
well, is an 8-foot fence required? I mean,
That
is an 8-foot
fence is
allowed?
there are not distinctions between an 8-foot fence and the zoning district. There are no 8-foot fences allowed anywhere.
Okay. Okay.
Hey, Ron.
Mr. Hoover. Mr. Hoover,
Yeah,
you're
I have
recognized.
a question for Aaron. Do the 7 points that you sent us for conditions for required for variance, do they still apply here?
Yes, sir. This is a zoning variance. And so those 7 criteria that I've spoken of previously, and for the benefit of the new members, what I'm referring to is the 7 criteria that are in our zoning ordinance section, I think it's 11.50. And those are the criteria that you are required to consider when determining whether or not to grant a zoning variance.
And all of them have to be answered as yes. In other words, you can't have any no's in there.
You do have to go through and make findings on each of them. And so if you're unable to make findings on some of them, it may lead you to the conclusion that you can't grant the variance.
Okay.
I think, Aaron, if I'm trying to clarify this so that everybody understands this, and I know, I think I can explain it better once I'm sure you and I are on the same page. But basically, in our terms, these 7 conditions are effectively elements to being able to grant a variance. All
Yes.
7 must apply. They're not factors. You can't say we got 5, but we don't have these other 2. If you don't have one, you don't have any. That's basically where those what they mean by they are all required.
Right.
Okay.
That's correct, Chairman. The section 11.20 of that part of the ordinance states that no variance shall be granted unless you find these 7 things.
Right.
And it goes through A through G.
Okay.
So that's exactly the way to think about it.
Great.
I have
All
a
right.
question, please. I'm sorry, I can't raise my hand.
Sure, Diane.
I apologize right now because I'm new and I do not have those 7 points in front of me. So I guess I have a question for the council who does know the 7 things, because it would seem to me the reasons that our citizens asked for this variance has to do with the height is needed to keep the dogs from jumping in the neighbor's backyard. To that point, I'm not sure I understand how 2 feet difference in a wood slat fence is going to more prohibit their dogs from jumping into the neighbor's yard as opposed to a 6-foot fence. And additionally, they have the whole front is a 6-foot fence with wood and chain link. So I'm not sure I understand how that basis applies here. And then the other part is to block our view into the neighbor's yard and vice versa. Again, the 6-foot height was made for some reason in the beginnings as a privacy barrier as well. And I don't see any reasons mentioned why that 2 more feet is necessary for a variance for additional privacy that the rest of the community can seem to be okay with. And I will try to look up my 7 points. I'm more knowledgeable about that, so apologies again.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me? My name is Jolie Porter. I'm the homeowner there.
Okay, we'll come to you in just a few minutes. You'll get to present
Okay,
your
perfect.
side and just as soon as
Yeah.
we get these questions out of the way. Yes, Fred, go ahead.
I didn't have any questions for Roy, so I was going to suggest that we hear the applicant's presentation. Maybe they can answer some of the questions,
Okay.
you know, before we even
All right.
ask.
Well, it's good that the questions get to come out so he knows what to answer. Okay, Shalane, yes.
I actually do have a quick question, if it's okay that I ask one, and this is for Roy. I think it might have been you, Mr. Durbin, who asked if Roy has any idea when the fence might have been constructed. But I'm wondering, Roy, in your opinion, in looking at the fence, does it look like it's a relatively new or was relatively newly put up, or does it look like it's been there for some time?
No, it looks fairly new. You can tell from, the cedar will tend to weather fairly rapidly. This is not weathered at all in our photographs.
Okay. Any other questions for Roy or Aaron? All right. Applicant, let's see. Go ahead and give your presentation, please. Hello?
Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. What?
We're ready for
Can I
you
get that
now.
one more time?
We're ready for you
Okay,
now.
so I don't know if anybody knew that it was an existing fence, and I apologize. I didn't know that we needed a permit. I was helping my grandmother. That's been her house since '85. So we replaced an existing fence, and I didn't realize that we had to have the permit to do that. But this was an ongoing thing. I started that project in March, and I didn't even know until I got the letter in the mail saying that, no, you have to have a permit. And I paid the permit twice, which is required for not paying it the first time. And then, submitted the $250 for the variance. And, but the reason it went up so high on that side is both of my neighbors have porches, and like right there, they sit right eye level to where they could see right in the yard over a 6-foot fence. So I don't think it's 8 foot on the sides. It's more like 7. It may be 7.6 in some spots, but that's the reason I went as high as I did with it. But it looks really good. My neighbor on the corner has actually written a letter. I don't know if y'all have it there in front of you, but he told me he wrote a letter saying that he liked the way the fence looked, and it was a big improvement from the shoddy one that was there before. That wouldn't hold dogs, wouldn't keep deer out. So that's basically why I went as high as I did. That's the reason I didn't file the permit in the first place. I would have, I've been here since 1985 myself. I want to get along with everybody and do everything the right way. I wasn't trying to get around anything. I just didn't realize I needed a permit for an existing fence. I'm not in construction. I just do it a little bit here and there, but.
Okay. All right. We understand that part. And I do have a question for you. This was a rebuild of an existing fence, you said?
That's exactly right. The fence has been there since 1980.
How tall was the previous fence?
It was 6 foot most of the way. In the front, it came down to about 4 foot up by where the gate is.
Okay.
But I went up a little higher to keep the deer out and the dogs in if we have the dogs in the front yard. And that extra little bit on the top, on the lower side, towards Barkay Ranch Road on my property. I mean, if anybody's ever seen some of my neighbors, they're not keeping their stuff as kept as they should. And it was just an effort for my grandma to not have to look at all that.
I understand.
I'll be as frank as I can.
Okay. And Roy, just a quick question. Had he rebuilt the existing fence as it was before, would he have needed a permit?
We prefer you to at least call and let us look at it. Typically, there's more to it than just replacing broken planks, and, so we would prefer a telephone call.
Oh, sure. I understand that.
In most circumstances, yes, sir.
Hang on a second, Diane. Go ahead, Roy.
Okay.
Yeah, just simply in most circumstances, the answer would be yes. Because typically there's going to be posts and rails and things like that are going to be involved.
So replacement of an existing fence, even if you're putting up the exact same thing, requires a permit?
Well, that's what I'm saying. If the answer, if they're only replacing planks that are in need of a repair, the answer is no.
Okay. What about posts that are in need of repair?
Yeah. Typically, new concrete, all that sort of thing. We have ordinances that are related to that. We would prefer you take out a permit. We at least give us an application and tell us what you're doing so we can review it.
Yeah, that part I understand.
Sure.
But
Rob?
Yes, Diane.
I just wanted to double check with Roy again, because I thought I read, when I was reading through various parts of the ordinance, I thought I read something that said if an existing fence was in greater than 50% disrepair, there was a permit required. I mean, I thought it was a little bit more distinctive than we would prefer. I feel like I read something that was specific if it was over 50%.
You're absolutely correct.
That's what I was trying to.
It would be a limited number of planks. Yes.
That was what I was trying to get at. Okay. All right.
And for what it's worth, I did And for what it's worth, I did one side at a time. I did 25% of that fence. Each time I tackled it, I did the back side, then I did one end, the other end. If that can fit in, I mean, if we're talking about 50% new,
that doesn't make any
maybe
difference.
something there.
Applicant, and I'm sorry, I don't have my, I got to find your name in the middle of all this. Mr. Porter?
Yes, sir. Jolie Porter.
Okay, Jolie. Were you ever provided a list of the 7 criteria that you need to get a variance?
No, I was just provided with the email that, you know, said that I needed to pay $250 to get this variance heard. And so I paid that. I haven't gone over and knocked off these bullet points like I would have if I would have known about them.
Okay.
I wouldn't file for a variance and waste my $250, you know, without looking at that. This is the first I've heard of them today. I hope everything complies, but I'm going in blind.
Okay. Freth, go ahead.
Roy has stated over and over and over again that it's in bold red letters on the application for the variance.
But and that's what I was wondering, because normally, I mean, I'm looking at the application. I think this is the application. Yeah, application for a zoning variance. I'm looking at it, and I'm looking for them on there. I don't see them. This is something I remembered from my previous time on the council.
Yeah,
and
sure,
that is,
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind.
they were listed right at the bottom of the old applications. Roy, do they get a separate sheet with this application that's got them on them?
Yes, sir, and it's part of the download, and they are referenced on the form that they exist, and look at your packet.
I'm looking at my packet. That's what I'm trying to say. Where in the packet is it?
Right above the applicant's signature.
Okay. Please take notice of the mandated standards regarding hardships and all requirements. Right. And does that include any of the attached ordinance provisions and address them in your narrative? Okay. All right. I see that on there. I don't see
the rest is in the application packet, Rob.
Okay.
Not just on that single page that we have.
I know, but Roy is so complete with his packet presentations that usually it's all right here for us to see. I just didn't see it, and I guess that part's not in here, right?
Right, and we specifically took that off because people were simply checking those boxes and not telling us anything.
I understand. I understand that. I wasn't trying to say that the form didn't need a rewrite, but it did provide some decent notice, I thought. Okay. All right.
We hope this would be better. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. The next application saw it.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Where are we? Okay. Anybody from the public? Well, let's. Do we need to discuss this? Does anybody on the council want to try to convince the rest of the council one way or the other?
In his application, he stated that part of the reason for raising it was to keep the dog in. However, the back fence is only 6 foot tall and is wire. It's been my experience that you can't keep a dog in if he's going to get out. If he's one of those escape artists, he's going to go under or over, climb something, whatever. But he has another route out over that 6 foot wire fence in the back. So that doesn't seem to fly with me.
Okay. All right. Anybody else on the board?
I wonder if whoever it is that might have their microphone on that we can hear talking in the background might be able to turn their microphone off.
Yeah, I've got like a TV or something in the background. Okay. All right, I'll open it up to comments from the public if anybody has any. Nope. All right, let's, is any further discussion needed? And yes, Mr. Hoover. You're muted, buddy.
Okay, yeah. I have a question. I see one opposed here, and I'd like to know where this person is who is opposed. Is he on either side? Is he on the side of the 8-foot fence? Where is this particular individual?
Hoover, for future reference, you will see every one of those comments includes a property ID, and that number is keyed to your notification map. In this case, that was property owner number 8. And on your map, it looks like 8 is not the lot immediately to the east. There's one lot between it and the one to the east.
Mr. Kaysen?
But I
think
that that property in the middle, as near as I could tell when I went to look at it, am I muted? All right, hang on. No, I'm not.
Oh, you're
the
okay
property between number 8 and, huh? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So the property in the middle doesn't appear to be anything on it. So the person that was opposed is looking directly at the fence, as near as I could tell.
Let me look at the mailing list and see if 8 and 9 are, but I mean, this is the manufactured home district. So some of those lots are very tiny, but
yes.
let me get to that packet and see if I can't look up the property owners real quick.
While he's doing that, I'd like to just talk about something for a moment as to how we may conduct these going forward. I think to keep the record as clear as possible, and Aaron, you can weigh in on this as well, but I think it's a really good idea that we only have motions to grant the waivers rather than motions to deny. If nobody makes a motion or nobody seconds a motion, then it'll die on its own. I think it helps keep the record much more clear if we keep our votes limited to the a motion to grant. And even if you're not in favor of one and you feel like the person deserves a hearing, you can bring the motion and then vote against it if you think somebody deserves a hearing on it by the entire board. But when you have motions to deny and then you get your A's and your nays mixed up, and as this the record needs to be really clear of what we do going forward in case it's ever taken up. I think that's just a good idea. I hope you all agree, and I think it'll make things simpler. We'll try to conduct it that way. Does that work for everybody?
I absolutely agree.
Okay, great.
Yes, sir. In answer to Mr. Kaysen's question, the narrow lot immediately next door is owned separately from the one immediately to the east of that. They are two different owners, but according to our aerial photograph in the packet, they both have mobile homes on them. There's just big space between them.
Yeah, driving by there today,
I have a question about the map.
Yeah, and that one, that first one, it's well hidden though. You could hardly see it from the street.
Okay, Diane, did you have something?
I did have a question for Roy. Roy, on the map that goes,
Josh and the chief, I'll just make sure I see who you want to see.
I'm sorry, was Roy talking to me?
That was not me, Miss Chopin.
Was it you?
No, ma'am.
Was that random voices or something? Okay.
Sorry, I think that's my neighbor here who's on the phone behind me. And so the walls are thin at City Hall. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay. Roy, on the map that I'm thinking is the map that goes out in the notification packet because it has the 200-foot perimeter around it. Where does that map come from? Is it a platted map? It's like an accurate map. And before you answer, I'll go ahead and tell you why I'm wondering. It's because the aerial photo that was attached, that eastern property line on the aerial photo appears to be a line that is perpendicular to Coyote Trail. The platted map, which I think is like an official platted map, the property in question is like a parallelogram. So both the east and the west side are more at an angle to Coyote Road. That's like it may have nothing to do with this. It's just something to me that kind of bugs me because I've looked at maps for a large part of my life, and for a plat to have two diagonal lines and then the aerial photo with the fence in question seems to be very perpendicular. It's like it's not the right line where that fence is.
Well, the source of the map is our GIS data. Some of it is digitized from aerial photographs. That will occasionally, because of the shadows created by trees, will occasionally create a margin of error with the location of a plat in relation to the aerial photograph. However, the plat lines are not generated that way. They are from our platted map. So I'm having a little trouble understanding every one of the property lines that I'm looking at are that parallelogram you're referring to. I'm not seeing the rectangular one with either of the side property lines perpendicular to the right of way.
So I'm confused by how you phrased all that, Roy. Are you agreeing with me that there's a discrepancy? Are you saying you do not see the discrepancy?
I don't see. What map are you looking at that's not that has this property line that's not a parallelogram?
I'm looking at the aerial photo that was attached. It's attachment to the application, the one that has all the trees and the blue circle in the middle of it, and the two pink lines.
Yeah, that is not ours. That the applicant supplied that. I have no idea what its source is. It could easily probably
Well, it looks like a
Google map.
All I'm saying is it doesn't look if the plat is correct, if the plat that went out with the notifications, if that is the correct or more correct as the property lines look, and it's consistent with how some of the lines are more of a more at an angle. And then the aerial photo that the applicant has attached with the pink lines denoting where his fence is, that eastern line with the pink line is more of a perpendicular. It doesn't appear to be the same fence line or the same property line as what is on the plat.
Yes, ma'am. And it appears as if his fence line looks to be, to me, within his property line, but I'm certainly not going to tell you, to the best of my knowledge, Google Maps doesn't include property lines. That's just him indicating where he thinks the fence is. And I don't know what he used. Right, but I can't tell you how he determined that. I mean,
I'm not asking you to tell me. I was just asking you to determine for me, to verify to me that the more accurate property line was the one that looked more like a plat to me, as opposed to the aerial photo And that's all I'm pointing out. To me,
Right.
I see a discrepancy as to where the pink line is denoting the fence from the client's perspective and the property line, which we think of as being the fence line from, from a determining institution that we're on.
His
I can
indication,
see a discrepancy.
in my opinion, okay, knowing that our property lines are reasonably accurate, because they're based on the plats, I would tend to think that his indication of where his fence is not consistent with where the property line might be. How he determined that location of the fence, I have no idea.
I wasn't expecting you to read his mind.
I don't think it has any bearing on this variance, though, does it?
No.
Probably not.
As I prefaced, it may not have any bearing. It was just something that was bothering me, that we're looking at two maps and it appears to be in two different places to me.
We will do our best to improve the coherency and appearance of an applicant's materials that he submits. We will not censor it or alter it unless we make it clear. If we put markings on top of it, we'll make it clear that those are our markings. This is simply his work product.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I just wanted to, you're moving along in your discussion of this item. I do think the point you made regarding votes is a good one to make. Either way is legal, but it is good to be consistent in how you vote. One thing I'd like to point for the benefit of our new members is you do want to go through each of those 7 factors so that the record is clear and make findings on each. And it does take a 75% affirmative vote for a variance to pass, which means that you have to have 6 ayes, six yeses on a motion to approve for it to pass, just so that everyone's aware.
That's correct. That's correct. Okay. So that I am consistent with your the current wording of your 7 requirements. Do we have that anywhere in the packet, or what section of that of the code was it? I'll pull it up real quick. If there's any other discussion, it can take place while I'm doing that.
It's 11.20.
11.20. It's in chapter 14.
Yeah, I got it.
Your zoning ordinance, 11.20.
Got it. Let's see.
So if we're not going to make a motion, so we have to make a motion if we want to grant a variance. If we don't, we just don't do anything. At what point do we just say, let's move on?
Well, we'll do that. We'll do that. I'll ask if there's any motions to be made, and if nobody makes one, I'll give.
Okay.
I'll say 1, 2, 3. Nope. Okay. Let's see. $14, 11. Hang on, I gotta get there. $11.2. Okay. Got it. Yep, these haven't changed much at all. All right. All right. First, the first requirement is, are there any special circumstances or conditions affecting the land involved such that strict applications of the provisions of the chapter would deprive the applicant of the reasonable use of his land, or would result in a significant practical difficulties or unreasonable hardship to the landowner, or unreasonable disruption of the natural terrain or unreasonable destruction of existing flora.
Looks like a no to me.
Aaron, do you want us to go through by, you asked that we have a special a finding on that. To me, it seems more appropriate that we make sure that we've considered them, and then there's a vote on whether the variance is granted or not. Are you saying that we need to have an absolute vote on each particular requirement?
You don't have to have an absolute vote on each requirement, but you do need to make findings. So there would need to be at least some discussion on each item. If the discussion is that you cannot find that there is anything that you couldn't say yes to, for example, A, that you just read, then you may not have to go any further. Because if you get to a particular set of criteria and you can't find that particular circumstance or that criteria is met, then you wouldn't necessarily have to move.
It seems that if we go through and we do that, then that essentially eliminates the process of actually making a motion, which, you know, I think if the applicant is here and somebody wants to move, I think they would be entitled to a vote. And you know, at that particular time, you know, we can make but I don't think you need a three-quart. I think it's up to each individual board member as to whether they make a finding as to each of these requirements, don't you?
The way that it reads, it says that no variance shall be granted unless the Board of Adjustment. So as a whole, the board must find each of these things are met. So
right. So if you vote aye, then you are agreeing that every one of them has been met.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Yes. Essentially, that is, I think the risk you run is if there's no discussion of any of those elements at all, there creates a question if, for example, if someone were to be denied the variance or be negatively impacted by the granting of the variance, because those folks can appeal as well. There would be a question as to the basis, you know, whether or not all the criteria, whether all the findings exist.
Okay, here's the way I propose we handle that. And that is, I'm going to ask the applicant about each one of these particular subjects, okay? And then each board member can determine whether or not what the applicant has said meets the criteria that's required. And then I'll ask for a motion. Does that sound fair?
At least, yes, that would at least provide some evidence on the record.
Yes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Applicant, you still there with us? Mr. Porter?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, I'm gonna go through each one of these and give you a chance to address each one, okay?
Sounds good.
Are there any special circumstances or conditions that affect the land that would, that strict application of this chapter would deprive you or your grandma, whoever owns the property? Who's living there now, you or grandma?
Both of us live there. We're both on the deed.
Okay.
It's been her house my whole life, and we've been there for the last 10 years with her.
All right. Are there any special circumstances affecting the land or conditions affecting the land that would deprive you of reasonable use of the land, or would result in a practical difficulty or unreasonable hardship?
No, not at all. Nothing like that.
Okay. There's nothing at all. Okay.
I don't see it. I mean, I'm not my grandmother's 82 years old, so I mean, she's handicapped, but it's not The fence went up right where the existing fence was, so there's no difference in any of the property lines or any of that.
And there's nothing special about the geography or the topography of the land?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right. All right. Is the variance necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of the substantial right of the applicant? In other words, is a variance required for you to have full enjoyment and use of that property?
Yes.
In what way?
Well, as mentioned before, it wasn't necessarily to keep the dogs in, but to keep the neighbors and the dogs from seeing them over the fence on that end. So both sides, I have neighbors with porches that are elevated. They're not right there at ground level. They can see right in my yard on both sides. If we want to put a pool in or something one day, I mean, just a little bit of privacy is kind of nice, and not having to see what, all stacked up on the fence line that my neighbor puts over there.
I understand. So the substantial, okay, I understand. All right. Is there a reasonable alternative to this variance that'll alleviate the difficulty or hardship for which the variance is requested? Can you have a 6-foot fence and then plant some trees or something to help give you some privacy?
Well, the problem is there's already 30-foot tall oak trees that have been there, I don't know, 40 or 50 years. And I mean, they're so tall, the canopy and everything's way up high. It's not like it provides any coverage. Nothing's going to grow down there on that fence line in the bottom of our property on the east end.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think we could get anything to grow because it's so shady. That's
gotcha.
Be the challenge.
All right. Now, we also have to consider whether or not granting this variance will have an effect of preventing the orderly use of other land in the area in accordance with the provisions of this chapter. In other words, this is going to affect your neighbor's sight line. That's one of the things that you actually said you wanted it to do, was affect their sight line into your yard, correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. How else is it going to affect them?
Well, I don't know that they would be affected at all. I've talked to both my neighbors and did before, and I told them, look, this is going up for not only the privacy, but also so the dogs can't see over the fence. I did the wood on the sides for that reason.
I understand, but variants are not going to be granted because of the dogs, because
no, I get that.
You brought the
line of sight as well. Privacy.
Yeah. Okay. The variance is going to we have to address whether or not this violates the intent of the zoning ordinance and not the goals or the intent of the zoning ordinance or the city's master plan. Okay, the city council, you understand, we don't have the right to determine policy. That's for city council to do. And essentially what we're asking is that what you're asking is for a law that was created by the elected policymakers to be set aside for your benefit. Okay, and so the intent of that law is several things. Number one is some standardization and to prevent real tall fences from screwing up other people's views. And,
sure.
Okay. Now, whether that's an issue here or not, it's something that we have to consider. Do you have any input regarding that information? Because here's why I'm asking you all these questions, because it's your burden to contradict, to meet these 7 requirements. It's not our burden to go out and look for them and find reasons for your behalf. These are things that you effectively need to prove to get your variance. And so the burden's it is on you. And I'm trying to help walk you through this.
I appreciate that. I put up this fence, in effort to help just basically bring things back better in the neighborhood. I mean, that fence was falling down. We've been trying to get it done for a long time. And then when I did, at that time, I talked to both neighbors on both sides, direct neighbors, no problems. So I would think it was all within the requirements that you have, because it's an exact replica of the fence that was there. The only thing I did different was go up a little higher on the ends.
Well, it sounds like you went up higher all the way around. And
no, I didn't.
And you didn't go get a permit.
No, sir. Oh, I didn't get a permit because it was an existing fence that was built before Lago Vista was a city, and I didn't realize that I had to have a permit, and that was my bad. Moving forward, I will make sure that I come and at least meet with someone and say, hey, do I need a permit for this? And then file it as so.
That's always the best case. All right. And lastly, such variance shall not restrict the reasonable and necessary unobstructed access to sunlight and preservation of views of others' properties that might be affected. Okay. So that, and you've stated that the area is already is shady.
Right.
Okay. All
But
right.
this is a fence too, I'll add, that was falling down on that eastern end because of stuff that my neighbor has stacked up on the fence that we maintain, we keep it clean. He doesn't do that. So there's trees that have fallen on the fence over the years. And when I rebuilt the fence and talked to him, I said, hey, Chris, I hope you don't mind if I go with a privacy here, just so it's more sturdy. It's not just the wire, so my dogs won't bark at you.
Okay.
So that was, I'm sorry I didn't get the permit. Like I said, I will moving forward, but I did get with my neighbors to make sure I wasn't going to, step on anybody's toes or make anybody upset.
I understand. Conscientious with the neighbors is commendable, but it doesn't necessarily relieve you of the other requirements. But all right.
Sure.
Rob, Freth has a question.
Yes, Freth, go ahead.
Is my understanding that the only variance that we're considering is the height of the fence, not the fence itself?
That's correct.
Or the location of the fence, but just the height?
That's correct. And if the variance is denied, I think, Roy, for compliance purposes, if the variance is denied, he brings that side down to 6 feet. Will he be given a permit?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Any further discussion? Does anybody have a motion? Or a motion with an amendment to the application? Aaron, am I permitted to make a motion?
Yes.
Okay. I would move that the variance be granted with the exception that the fence be lowered to 6 feet on that side of the house. That's currently 8 feet.
Just for clarification, Mr. Chair, it's both side property lines.
Both side property lines. Okay. Thank you. Then I'll amend my motion to say that both property sidelines be brought down to 6 feet. Yes, Freth.
6-foot fence doesn't require a variance.
Well, yeah, I understand. Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, then, applicant, are you understanding what's going on here? I want to make sure we're fair.
Yes, I am. But Let me explain what's going on with the topography of the land, since we didn't get into that. The western side of my property there on Coyote Trail, my neighbor has a retaining wall that was built. I don't know if they got a permit. It's on my easement. I can't even get a vehicle down that side. That's another subject. On that side of the house, he had a retaining wall built. When you're standing in his yard, you can look over the top of a 6-foot fence on my side. Are you understanding? It's about 2.5 foot lower on my side because of the retaining wall there. Now the 6 foot, if that's measured from his side, I'm talking about this western side of the property. I don't know if any of you have the map or have a plat or know anything about the hill or the topography there. So is there, now if I lower it to 6 feet on my side, that'll make it 3.5 feet from where he can stand and look over it at his belly button. Any dogs he has in his yard on that side can easily jump into my yard. I'm not saying my dog's gonna escape. I'm throwing out some scenarios so y'all can see the reason for why this fence is high on the west side. I told you why the fence is high on the east side. That's for privacy. So the dogs don't bark. You heard my story.
Yep.
On the west side, it's a different one. There's a hill there. There's a retaining wall that was probably built without a permit. It should probably be taken down because it's on my property line. It's not in the easement. That's another day. I'm not trying to get into all that. I just want somebody to take a look at this and say, wow, he's right. Look, if you go into my neighbor's property and you look over my fence where it is right now, you can stand there and see right at the top of it. If I take it down the 2 feet that you're suggesting or that's required, then it's going to be it could be a bad situation as far as him keeping animals in. And, I mean, that's the whole reason for it. Does that make sense? Am I being clear? I appreciate y'all's consideration on this.
Yes, sir.
Well, but
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
you have a photograph, the very first staff photograph in the
Yep.
packet is of that condition he's describing, of that retaining wall and the 2 garages, the whole thing. You can see exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I see that.
How is that structure so close to that property line? But that's another question, another issue as well. Sorry.
You bet.
It was done without a permit back in the 90s.
Oh, okay.
In the 90s.
Well, does the retaining wall keep going back? It looks like the fence doesn't start until the end of the retaining wall.
It does. Yes, the retaining wall keeps going back past that gate in the fence, and it goes halfway down my fence line on that west property line. The retaining wall goes, I'm going to say 25 feet of the 50 feet that's back there. And then it kind of gets to where the bricks are higher than the ground, and the ground comes around it there. But that's always been a washout spot, and I think that's why he put that up in the first place.
Okay.
The retaining wall to deflect the water, but it actually made it worse on our spot. I had to put in a French drain and kind of do some different stuff because of that. But the height is what, the reason for the height is basically he can stand there and, step right over the fence on his side, where my side be 6 feet. Nobody could even see that back there except for me and him.
Rob, this is Suzanne. I've got a question. And there may be some precedent in other decisions, but would the west side of the fence line fall under the category of special circumstances or conditions, and the east side, could we consider both of them separately in this case?
Well, yeah, and that's where we can, yes, you can. You can ask to make a correction on one side and not the other if that's what you so choose to do.
Well, it seems like, that there's a special circumstance or condition on that west side of the property, just as we kind of step through these 7 points, that they would be independent of each other.
Okay.
I think we need to finish that.
it says if there's unusual conditions,
Yeah. And that, I asked about topography and he didn't say anything. So he kind of surprised me there at the end.
But let me finish my point.
Yeah.
It says that these conditions would deprive the owner of reasonable use of his land, okay? Or result in significant practical difficulties or unreasonable hardship to the landowner or unreasonable disruption. I mean, I still don't, in my opinion, I don't think it meets that.
Yeah, yeah, and we're not here to suggest solutions or anything, but if you talk to your landowner about putting a 6-foot fence on top of on his side of the yard.
Shalane had a comment.
Shalane?
I actually just had a question, if I might ask. So if this was to replace the fence that was there previously on the applicant's property, how tall was the fence here that he replaced?
On the west side of the property?
Yeah.
Is that what you're referring to? It's a 6-foot fence. It was 6 foot all the way down. I had his dogs jump in my yard. At one point, they actually killed my grandma's dog. This was Christmas 10 years ago. Wasn't a very happy Christmas because we were out of town. And I don't want anything like this ever happening again. I hope you all understand. If you're standing there and you could see this in person, it would be crystal clear.
No, I think we can say this picture is pretty illustrative. Howard, go ahead.
Okay, so this question is really for Aaron. Okay. At one of our meetings, Roy indicated that if you put a fence on top of an existing wall, okay, whether that be a regular wall or whether that be a retaining wall, that the fence is measured from the ground level. In other words, you add that retaining wall to the fence. So let's just say this guy put up a 6-foot fence on his retaining wall. You'd be, if his retaining wall is 6 foot, now you got a 12-foot fence.
So the previous condition where we saw a somewhat similar condition was that there was a fence that was installed abutting or next to a retaining wall, and the fence itself actually went down below to the original base of the land, not on top of the retaining wall. This kind of raises two issues. One, to answer your direct question, the fence height is measured from the top of the property line. Now, you cannot create a condition where you artificially raise your property, therefore you're creating the hardship, and then put another fence on top of that to artificially raise it. In this particular circumstance, this property owner did not raise the height of his property, of the grandma's property. The neighboring property either raised it or it was the natural slope of the property, and they put the retaining wall there for what other purpose. In that circumstance, if that was the natural height of the land, the natural grade of the land, then you could put a 6-foot fence on top of that. No 6-foot fence needs a variance. If he put an 8-foot fence on top of that natural grade, even though it's higher than his neighbor, he would have to have a variance. If that neighbor artificially raised the height of his land, he wouldn't meet the hardship requirement for an 8-foot fence because he created that hardship by artificially raising his land. In this particular circumstance, there's no indication that this property owner, the applicant, actually did anything to the property, and so the height of the neighbor's property is not a condition that this applicant created. It certainly raises a conundrum of, do you then encourage your neighbor to raise up their property so you can build a taller fence? I don't know that that would be advisable, but this is a condition that's existed there, at least by the applicant's statement, for approximately 30 some odd years. So the fact that that neighboring property is higher and would create, you know, if there was some evidence that it would create an issue such that it is a special circumstance affecting the land that would deprive him, the applicant, of a reasonable use of his land, meaning every day the neighbor's dog can get in because now the fence is essentially from the other side 3 feet high. I think that you could make the case that that could meet the qualification under A, because the applicant didn't create the situation. The applicant didn't have any hand in creating that particular circumstance. If this applicant were to articulate that it would deprive him of the reasonable use of his land, courts, when considering variances and considering hardships, have looked a little more liberally at these issues than say what the kind of strict requirements that are in our zoning, in our variance conditions. I hope that helps.
Okay, Diane?
So as I understand things, that we can put a motion where we modify the variance request, and we can theoretically make a motion to grant the variance on the west side only, but not grant it on the east side.
You're correct.
Is that a true statement?
That is a true statement.
Okay, well, when we get to the, are we to the motion part?
Let's see, Mr. Hoover, is your hand up, or you look sort of
No,
up?
I'm good. I
Okay.
agree with Diane. I think that's the way to go.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
Before you take a vote, I'd encourage you to ask if there are any public comments.
Yeah, any public comments regarding the 7 conditions required for variance? Mr. Roberts?
Hi, Mr. Chairman. I think listening to this, I haven't been listening to it 100% like you guys have. I'm working at the same time, but just my quick takeaway on this is pretty straightforward. I mean, he's got some extenuating circumstances there with the neighbor. He's clearly evidenced the fact that the neighbor's dog has killed their dog. He stated that he built it for, in part, explicitly as a protection against those dogs. He also stated that if you're standing up on the neighbor's property, the top of the fence is at his belly button. That doesn't give you much privacy. I don't know. I think you guys ought to approve it in its entirety, but I think the prudent thing to do would be at the least to approve it with a motion to amend. And if y'all still have if y'all lack the super majority, you can, using rules of procedure, you can, still put this you can still postpone the vote into another meeting, and those who have trepidations about it can go out to the property, look at it, and reconsider, in particular, that one side of the property.
Okay.
That's just my input. Thank you.
Thank you. Shalane, you had your hand up a minute ago?
Yeah, and it's entirely possible that I might have missed this, but did you guys go through and discuss all 7 of the criteria already?
Yes.
All 7?
All 7.
I thought I only heard like 4 of them. I apologize.
No, maybe we should number. But,
the last question I have is privacy. Is privacy listed anywhere in the 7?
It isn't, other than through being entitled essentially to a 6-foot privacy fence. If you're entitled to a 6-foot privacy fence, and there is this, I think the question is if you're entitled to 6-foot privacy fence, and there is this unnatural phenomenon having to deal with the topography of your property or the property next door, are you still entitled to 6 feet of privacy, which in this particular case, he's not getting. 6 feet of privacy or security. I think that is the crux of where we are at this point. Okay? Good looking
Can I
cat, by the way.
raise a
Okay.
clarification?
Freth, yes.
I just have one question of the applicant. Was the previous fence a wood privacy fence or was it a wire fence?
It was exactly as the fence is on the north and south parts of that property. It was wood and wire, ma'am. And that means it's kind of like a ranch style. I'm sorry?
So, not a privacy fence, is that correct?
Not on the front. No, absolutely not. There was no privacy fence before. It was a fence that you could see through. There was wire that, you know.
Okay. Right.
So I opted to change it on the ends just to kind of keep both of our dogs, my dogs, the neighbor's dogs, everybody from barking at each other.
Right. But I'm not sure that's germane, because you know the ordinances, as you correctly pointed out, he doesn't need a variance for a 6-foot private wood fence. You know, if you look at it that way, think of it as in being entitled to a 6-foot privacy fence, because he can get that without any special dispensation from the city. Yes, Mr. Kaysen.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the fact that we're calling them a privacy fence has any bearing on whether they're actually entitled to privacy. But,
That's right.
I feel like he has a special circumstance due to that retaining wall, and in the fact that that allows entrance into his yard by dogs or whatever's back in the other yard, and I would be willing to say that it meets the conditions in item number 1. I'd take privacy out of it though, because I mean, if you had a 2-story house next to it, that's not going to gain you. That's not really an issue. It's really kind of a safety issue. And it's not of his making because the wall was put in by someone else. On the other side of the yard, the only case he has over there is privacy, and privacy is not a hardship.
And you had the objection of the neighbor that was a lot over.
Yeah. So, I mean, my opinion is this does meet criteria.
All right, Ms. Ayer, did you have a question or a question?
I did. My comment was really very similar to Jim's. I really wanted to clarify that there is really no right to a 6-foot privacy fence as far as privacy goes. There's a right for a 6-foot fence, which may or may not be a privacy fence. But Aaron has been really clear before that we were not to assume that privacy was a right.
No, privacy is not a right, but call it what you will, a 6-foot non-see-through fence. You're entitled to that. So, but
you're entitled to a 6-foot fence.
Correct.
But we're not to consider that he's entitled to a 6-foot of privacy. I think I'm on the same page as Jim, that there are other circumstances that are germane, but not the right to 6 foot of privacy.
I worded it wrong. I worded it.
Coming up on other issues, and I don't want to set a precedent for us to say that they're entitled to 6 foot of privacy.
Correct. Okay. All right. I worded that inartfully. I apologize. Okay. Diane, any more questions?
Yes.
No questions. I'm ready. I would like to make a motion when we're ready for a motion.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Yeah. How old, the new fence, how old is it?
The new fence was completed just a month ago. I still don't even have the top cap on it. I was waiting for all this to come, the permit.
Okay.
But it's not, it was started in March, and when I got notified of the letter, I paid the fees. I was going to go ahead and finish, and I said, you know what, I'll wait, because if I got to, take a foot of it off, it's not 8 foot on the sides. We cut those boards. They're 8-foot pickets They had to be cut down to 7. So this thing that, and everybody said about an 8-foot fence on the sides, that's not it. It's 7 foot, and it's just a little taller than it was. Basically to keep the dogs out, the dogs in. It is a safety issue, as the one gentleman stated. And, I mean, my place down there in Coyote Trail is one of the nicest places around down there. And I try to keep it that way, and I want to keep it that way.
Okay, my next question is,
you know,
okay. So
amazed that I'm having to go through all this for a foot on a fence that was already there.
Okay, but you said that you had an issue with the dogs jumping over 10 years ago.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's when the other fence was there, on that retaining wall that I talked about on the westernmost corner of the property. It's behind a garage. You can't quite see it from the street, but you can see the corner post there. That's where they got out. They used to get out of their yard right there.
Okay.
I don't want that to ever happen again.
Okay. So for 10 years, you had that same existing condition and you just now want to change it?
Absolutely. Now, while I'm doing my fence, I want to make it better. I absolutely want to change it. Why would I do it when I wasn't doing the fence? I mean,
okay.
Well, if it was a safety issue, I would just thought you would have jumped on it quicker. That's all.
we don't keep our dogs back there, you know? I mean, I'm not, I just wanted to improve it for in the future. So when it comes back, this doesn't happen a second time.
Okay.
Now's the time while we're doing the fence.
Okay. Any further questions or comments from the board? Do we have a motion? Diane, did you want to make a motion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we approve the variance for the west side fence, that there is a hardship there, and but to ask the citizen to retain the 6-foot guidance on the east side. No variance for the east side, just the variance for the west side.
Okay, so basically you would like to approve the motion as to the, as specifically only to the west side of the fence.
That's what I'm proposing, yes.
Okay. Do we have a second?
A second.
A second from Mr. Kaysen? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. 1, 2, 3. All right. All opposed?
Me.
1 opposed. Okay. Variance passes 7-1. Okay. Now I'm going to move on to 20-1734-ZON-VAR. Diane? Yes?
Excuse me, I just want to, note of specificity. You said the variance passes 7-1. Did you actually mean the variance as modified passes 7-1?
The variance as amended by your motion. Yes, passes 7-1. Okay. 20-1734-ZON-VAR, application for a variance granting relief from the requirements of Section 22, Chapter 14 of the Lago Vista Code of Variances or Code of Ordinances to allow portions of an existing Type B wood privacy fence built without a permit to remain 8 feet in height at 1909 Patriot Drive, Highland Lakes Estates, Section 34, Lot 4049 and 34045. Okay. Roy, you still out there with us?
Yes, trying to ignore a ringing phone. This one's in a lot of ways similar to the last one, even though the property is obviously in a different location. They recently purchased the house. They purchased the house with a fence in need of repair and proceeded to diligently do the required repairs, not realizing it was a permit. The only difference is on this side, only a portion of the one side of the fence is taller than allowed.
Okay. So
I think you have some photographs that show it fairly fairly well.
Yeah, we got one side at 8 feet rather than 2.
And,
Okay.
and most of it is 8 feet, but not all of it.
Gotcha. Okay. That fence runs along that one side. Is there a fence along the back of the property or the other side? Oh, the other side's a road, never mind. Across the back of the property?
I'll be honest with you. I don't think we have the fence permit yet. Again, I think we have fees. At some point, depending on what you do, we'll ask that they document what they did.
Yeah.
There is a fence that goes across the back of the property between the two neighbors that definitely looks like it's the 8-foot fence, the one that goes between the two neighbors. Now, that neighbor has not yet submitted their approval or disapproval, but they said that they had intended to approve. But whatever it's worth, they stated that they're going to approve it. The adjoining neighbor.
You're breaking up, Linda.
Yeah. Okay, and that's the neighbor on Patriot Drive and not the neighbor on Owens Drive. Is that correct, Linda?
It would be like their backyard neighbor.
Gotcha. Okay. There is a fence there, you're saying?
It is, and it's a very well-constructed 8-foot fence that the neighbor is very happy that is there. But it's a very visible 8-foot fence.
The variance application asserts that that's not an 8-foot fence, but that may be an omission.
Okay, I'll just say, to me, it looked taller than 6 foot. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just, from my, looking at it, it looked like it looked higher than 6 foot, but I could be.
Right. I'll be honest with you, I didn't get a photograph at that corner to be able to render an opinion that's reliable.
Because,
Okay.
well, the fence on the side of the property that faces the street, that is so covered with greenery and trees, you don't even see that the fence is there. It's kind of like moot how high the fence is, because you can't even see it.
Okay.
I drove by to see it. I can tell you what I saw because I drove over there to see it.
Yeah, I did too.
Right.
Did you think it was 8? Did you think it was 8 foot?
As Linda said, on the Owen side, it's all overgrown with oleander. You can't really see anything. But at the back corner, and by the back corner, I mean their neighbor at 21800. At that corner close to Owens, you can see that it starts out as a 6-foot fence, but then it gradients up, just like on the side fence where you could see it more clearly in the pictures that were taken by Roy, that it gradients up. And then if you drive in the front of the house at 21800, you can look through the side and there's a big hump. So I agree with Linda. I didn't go measure it, but it does look like the majority of that back fence is over 6 feet. I don't know, 8 feet, but it definitely gradients up just like the side fence does at the beginning, and then carries on, and you can see it make a big rounded area as you get to the south side of the property line at that neighbor. That was just addressing your question, Rob, about was there a fence at back sides? And there is. I agree with Linda. It looks like it's more than a 6-foot fence.
I just want to make sure we don't have to come back twice on the same piece of property. That's what I was concerned about. Yes, Mr. Kaysen.
It looked like a 6-foot fence to me. So,
okay.
It's probably worth another look at it if there's a real question.
All right. let's talk. We'll talk to the applicant in a few minutes and see if we can clear this up. Go ahead, Linda.
Neighbor where the wood fence is, he indicated that it was not compliant, and he was concerned that we would be turning down the request. So that's what led me. I'm 5 feet tall. It looked like way taller than me when I was standing there.
You're 5 feet tall. Everything looks way taller than you.
Way taller.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Anybody else have any other quick comments before we get to the or questions for Roy before we get to the applicant? Roy, do you know what fence was there before?
No, sir, but we have reason to believe there was no permit. It predates our permit records that we keep digitally now that are very accessible.
Okay.
That would certainly be consistent with his explanation that the fence was in a state of disrepair.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
We have records for everything permitted since 2012.
Gotcha. Okay. There's no further questions. I'll hear from the applicant now. Anybody else? Last chance before we talk to the applicant. No? Okay. Applicant, sorry, I'm not on the right page for your name here. So are you out there?
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, my name is Ryan Alexander, and thank you for taking the time with us today. As everybody had stated or mentioned, so the portion in question that we received the notice for was the only section that we replaced. We bought the house and moved in last April, and that's the rest of the fence had all the other areas had been previously been redone by the previous owners, but they had not, for whatever reason, updated that section of the fence as well. So we went ahead, because we have a dog, and I wanted to make sure that she couldn't get out. The fence was falling down in areas. The gate would hardly stay closed on the side of the house, and so we went ahead and updated. And as we worked on this prior to the actual when I started building the fence, we did check to see if we needed a permit, but unfortunately at that time the city website didn't list the permit as necessary for a fence. I have gone back and have seen that has now been updated to show that fences need a permit with everything else, jacuzzis, pergolas, things of that nature. But when we had checked, we didn't see one for a fence, so we went ahead and replaced it. But again, it was only that where I had turned in the drawing, the hand drawing portion that was required with the application for that side of the house. That's why that was only included.
Okay. All right. Mr. Hoover? You're muted.
I have a question.
Okay.
I see that there are 5 approvals for this fence, and I'm trying to figure out, does 1905 and 2106, which both are contiguous with 1909, which is the property we're talking about, are they the ones that sent the approvals?
So all of my neighbors that I have spoken to include the neighbor across the street on Owens, have all said that they absolutely approve. The neighbor behind us on Owens, I spoke with him this morning, and he had mentioned that he had sent an approval letter. The neighbors adjacent that we share the new fence portion with, they're the neighbors that before I started building there, we agreed on the dimensions and everything that was going to happen there. I had let him know what we were planning. The reason that we were planning to do an 8-foot fence only in that section that separates the portion of the yard that, due to the incline, due to the slope of the yard, is the reason we went that high, because of the privacy And so that's why we did just that section there, but then it slopes down and tapers down to make sure that we're not above the 6 feet in the front.
Okay.
So the only people that can see that section of the fence are ourselves and our neighbor that did agree to this prior to.
Okay, so my question is, there's a property on the corner of Owens Lane and Owens Cove. And there's also a property on Owens Cove that's a big piece of property that abuts your property. Are these two individuals that own this property, are they ones that provided us with things in favor of you building this wall fence?
No letters.
For Owens, I would say not. I didn't talk with them because it wasn't a portion of the fence that directly affected them. I discussed the new portion of the fence with the neighbor that would directly affect the two of that separated our 2 yards.
Okay, you're talking about the neighbor that's on Owens Cove.
That is on Patriot.
Oh, that's on Patriot. Okay, so he
Correct.
has
That is the only section of new fence. Yes, sir.
Okay.
In answer to Mr. Hoover's questions, none of the written comments came from adjacent property owners. If the adjacent property owners commented, it was in addition to those written comments that are in your packet.
Mr. Carson. Kaysen, excuse me.
Who built the fence? Did you do it yourself or did you contract it?
I'm sorry, what was that? You kind of cut out for me.
Who built the fence? Did you do it yourself or did you contract it?
I did.
You built it yourself. Okay.
All right. I'm going to open this up to the public. Anybody outside of the board have any comments? Oh, okay. Close public hearing. Oh, Freth.
No, I'm not public,
You're
but
not,
I do.
you're not public. What do you got?
I wanted to find out exactly what portion of the fence that we are identifying as being too high. Is it between him and the neighbor on the cove? Because that's the portion that looked too high to me. Or is it between him and the neighbor on the Patriot side?
We advertised it broadly as possible so that you have the ability to approve any sections that are taller than 6 feet. From his application, the only ones we knew about were the ones that he replaced. If there are other ones that you believe are higher than that, you have just like on the last fence, you have the ability to include them or exclude them at your prerogative.
So did he replace the fence between him and the neighbor on the cove?
And we did not.
I need to say no.
No, ma'am, we didn't. The only section was the section that was between ourselves and our neighbors on Patriot. The Owens Cove is our neighbor adjacent behind us, but we didn't replace that fence.
It's the hand-drawn picture on page 53 or 59. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Right. And for what it's worth, our code enforcement staff did not flag that other section of the fence. That doesn't mean they saw it and determined that it was okay. They didn't flag it, is all I can tell you.
Well, here's my concern is we don't want to be back in here next month on that other section of fence. And since he didn't apply to have that particular section squared away, do we want to table this to make sure that back fence is also either in compliance or not in compliance, and try to take care of this all at once? Miss Diane, What's your comment there?
I have a quick question with regard to your context. If someone purchased a house and the existing fence was out of specs, so to speak, is that new purchaser responsible for post-permitting an existing fence? What is the rules there? Because he didn't build that back fence. It was already done when he purchased, as I understand it. And so how could it come up again to us?
If it's in violation and was never permitted or no variance was ever received, it's still in violation.
Right.
When you buy the house, you buy the violation. Aaron, is that your understanding as well?
That's correct. The only exception to that would be if you buy a piece of property that had a non-conforming condition that existed prior to the adoption of the city's regulations. For example, there was a discussion earlier about when was the fence built. If it was built before the city existed, then it would have been a non-conforming fence.
So once grandfathered, always grandfathered. That's the deal. But if it was in violation before, then it's still in violation, and you could buy a violation.
Can you repair a nonconformity and leave it non-conforming?
So that's the other thing. That's where the language in our variance ordinance regarding to the 50% comes into play.
Right.
You can repair up to that percentage, and that's what you need to look at if this is a situation where it was a pre-existing non-conforming.
Well, and more importantly, if it was repaired more recently, we don't have a permit anything past 2012 on record.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, does that answer your question?
Unknown. Mine?
Well,
it's still an unknown.
8 years old, correct?
If it's the fence is more than it was repaired, if the newer version of the fence by the previous owner was done prior to 2012, then it would be moot. Any other fence that is not a part of this application, it becomes a moot infraction of the current rules, boundaries, and regulations, right? And if it is an unknown quantity, if we cannot find when that newer fence was built by the previous owners, then it's again an unknown quantity.
Well, yes and no. He replaced this fence because it was in a state of disrepair, and the other one was not. One that would tend to imply that it had been repaired more recently.
Well, implied, it's still kind of an unknown because it's very subjective, not objective.
But what I'm trying to prevent is for this homeowner to have to come back here twice and pay 2 fees to get a variance, or at least for us to consider a variance. If we don't know at this point, and he may not know at this point, that's what I'm trying to determine, and from both the homeowner and Roy, is if we need to, if it would benefit this homeowner to table this for a month to figure out whether that back fence is in compliance or not, to answer some of your questions as well, Diane.
Right, that's what I was getting at. That to me, it seems like an unknown quantity, and if it's an unknown quantity, then it's potentially moot as applies to this particular permit application.
Well, potentially moot, I guess, but we don't know. Once we know what we ought to know, then we ought to be able to move forward. Is all I'm trying to say. Roy, is there Do you guys want more time to determine whether that back fence is?
Well,
is
unless
or not?
the applicant knows himself.
Well, and the applicant can, can we give him the opportunity to amend his application if we find out that that is the case?
Yes, sir. And that's what I was getting at earlier. We advertised it very broadly. If you want to give a variant in this hearing for that fence being taller than 8 feet, we've advertised it in accordance with that. The only issue you might have is a somewhat misleading packet.
Well, yeah, and I don't know that I would want to give a variance to somebody that didn't ask for it.
Right.
So I think it needs to be in the application. Aaron, can you weigh in on this, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. I would be very concerned about granting a variance for which the applicant hasn't specifically requested it. Your better move, if you do have concerns and you do want to, for a judicial economy or administrative economy, would be to either table it and let him, let's all do our homework, come back here in whatever designated amount of time, or move on with what you've got. And if he needs to get another one, then you could we'd have to look to see. I know Roy doesn't have the authority to waive the fee requirements for a variance, but part of your if you chose to grant the variance, you might find some way to note that you would consider this as part of the same application at a later date. There may be ways to kind of cut that. The cleanest way is to do it all at once, to postpone for a specified
and he can certainly amend his application prior to the hearing, correct?
Yeah.
And since the fence is built, there's no time constraints or anything like that. Even if there were, we could do a special call meeting, but that doesn't appear to be warranted in this case.
I don't think so either. Diane?
Again, my context is a little bit different because I read their letter as requesting let me just say 1, 2, 3 on the 4th paragraph of their letter that they attached to their application. It says specifically, we're not seeking a waiver of any permitting or late fees. However, we are pursuing a fully permitted fence in its current state and to be recognized as being in compliance with all state and local laws. I'm reading that they are requesting what you're saying, that perhaps we should table so we don't come back again. To me, they covered that in their application. But please correct me if there's another reading to that.
No, I think you're right. And that's a good catch. That's a good catch. But my thought is Roy ready to present on that other fence? It does not sound.
Well, and no, sir. I mean, I would call your attention to the site plan, which doesn't show any fence at all on that property line.
Yeah. And if you read his application in conjunction with the picture he drew, it doesn't address the back line at all. So yeah, Freth, was that you waving?
No, it was
Mr. Casey.
Jim.
Sorry. Go ahead, Jim.
Got a question for the applicant. Are you there?
Yes, sir.
Where your new fence ties into that back fence, is there a difference in height between the back fence and your new fence? Do they come together evenly, or is there a difference in height?
No, sir. There is a difference in height there for the remainder of that portion. And as far as the concern, my drawing that I had sent in, we were under the impression that as far as the rest of the fence were concerned, that as a fence that was already there, that everything that we were being asked to do were for our updates for that particular section.
Okay, so the new fence, where it ties into the old fence in the back, is a certain amount higher.
Yes, sir. And I'm curious if as far as the other owners on Owens, we have the one direct neighbor in the back. We have 2 lots that the previous owners of the house, I guess when they built the house, they bought 2 lots and they built on this lot itself. So the fence that we fixed, that was on that, the new fence that was, we thought was the only portion in question, there is still another 100, maybe 150 or so feet of fence that is not the same height that goes to the back corner of our lot.
Okay,
And that is shown on the site plan.
So then at that corner, the fences are the same height.
Correct. It's at the same height, and it does get a little taller as the slope in our yard goes down towards the street, which is also what we tapered on our end that we replaced as well.
Are you totally sure that that fence across the back of your yard is your fence and not the neighbor's fence?
Well, we share the fence with the posts being on our side of the fence. Does that indicate my fence?
It does.
For what I can see,
Should.
we have the posts. We have the posts on our side of the fence.
I think that neighbor on Owens Cove has a wrought iron fence, the rest of his yard.
Yes, ma'am, they do.
The Smiths, are the Smiths the people that we're talking about, Mr. Alexander, on the back? Because they seem to think it is your fence.
Tom and Terry, I'm not sure. We've met them a handful of times. If it's Tom and Terry, then yes, there are neighbors on the backside, and that's why I was curious, because it does match the rest of our fence, and with the weathering on the fence, it looks like it was done in conjunction with the rest of our fence that was not replaced. That is all weathered together.
I feel like it is your fence. And
I would imagine so, yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Hoover.
Mr. Alexander, are you opposed to delaying this a month so that Roy can go out and I guess measure your back fence and see if it's over 6 feet, so that you don't have to come back and do a double variance? Are you opposed to that, or do you want a decision right now?
No, we're certainly not opposed to it. Like we had put in our application, we just, we thought we were doing the right thing by, replacing the fence that was dilapidated, and we're just trying to make sure we're fully in compliance here, whatever that, but which I can tell you, as being a 6 foot tall person myself, that fence in the back that is separated ourselves and Owen is taller. There's no doubt about that. We just didn't list anything. We weren't aware that any existing fence that was here with the house prior to us purchasing and all of that was what was being questioned. It was the new replacement from what we understood from our notice.
Okay, well, it sounds to me like if it's over 6 feet, then again, you would have to, if we don't delay this, then you would, correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, but you would have to pay for another variance for the back fence.
That's
right.
That's correct. Yeah, it's better to handle it all at once.
I'll put it this way. If that fence is non-compliant, it's best that you get a variance so that you don't have these issues in the future.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. I guess that'll be something.
And our guys, I'll be honest with you, they don't measure every section of fence. If it's close, they probably say it's close enough to 6 feet. But but they didn't call it to our attention, so I didn't follow up on it.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Any other, Diane?
Just that one other thing that I had already mentioned, that if it was shown that the fence that had been previously replaced by the previous owners was done prior to, 2012, prior to permitting being required, then it would be.
No, ma'am, let me correct you. Permitting was required in 2012. All I can tell you is they didn't get one anytime since 2012. They could have permitted it right before I mean, they could have replaced it right before he bought the house. They just didn't get a permit.
True. That's why I said it was unknown. It was unknown. But if it was able to be shown that it was repaired prior to 2012, then it wouldn't be a permit requirement passed on to the new owners necessarily. That was kind of where I was trying to wrap my head around that exception. Potential exception. That's
I don't think ownership changes affect anything as far as these go. But Freth, go ahead.
Aaron can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think anything that's not in compliance with the ordinance is going to have a variance because they just can't have a non-conforming. We've been there before on some other properties where they had non-conforming, and you know they had to come back and get a variance to keep it the way it was.
And I suspect we've had a fence ordinance for quite a while. You know, suggesting that fence predates our fence ordinance would be a pretty hard stretch. These things weather pretty fast.
We've had one since at least 2002, because that's when we moved in and we changed ours and went up and checked. So
okay. I was just going by something I had heard. Maybe I misunderstood it about the 2012 being some sort of a hallmark. But
we have records of any permit since 2012 is all that means.
It's only the okay.
Right.
Okay.
But we have lots of violations of fences built without permits.
I saw that. I drove up and down the roads, and there is quite a few fences that are over 6 feet tall over there.
Mr. Kaysen.
I'm just sitting here looking at historical aerials. The house was there in 1995, but I can't tell about the fence, but the fence was there in 2002. So I don't know how that relates to your, when your ordinance went into effect. But it's possible.
That's one of my issues with Franklin. Normally you have all the amendment dates compiled in the ordinance. Franklin was not doing that for us. So we would have to literally reassemble those dates. It would take a lot of effort, but we can do it.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I got a question.
Yes, Mr. Press.
So knowing now that the back fence is out of compliance, can we consider it today, or does he have to? Do we have to put it off?
No, we can't consider it today.
Yeah, I don't think we can consider it today.
Okay.
We can consider the one side, and then he can come back and do the other side. But we're trying to save him in pain here. Okay. Any additional discussion?
Yeah.
Do we want to have? Does anybody want to make a motion before we go through these 7 critical factors? Mr. Mason. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
I just want to, say that if we do delay this, which I think is a good idea, that's no guarantee that there's going to be a variance. It's just
that's correct.
That we're going to go and consider both of them at the same time, the existing and the new. And so given that, I will make a motion that we delay that on the existing fence.
That we're going to table this application. That's your motion? We're having some audio problems with you, Jim.
That's
I
it.
can't hear
That's
you.
my motion.
Okay.
Second.
Right. Second.
Okay, that's
Any additional discussion before we vote?
Public
All
comment.
in favor? Oh. Hang on a second. Somebody said something.
I think it was
Sorry,
Aaron.
Did you take public comment already?
I asked for public comments before.
Sorry.
Saw Paul Roberts wave me off and nobody else spoke up. So, okay, all in favor of tabling this application? Did we get a second?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right. All opposed? Unanimous. Okay. Thank you very much. Any future agenda items? Mr. Alexander, do you understand what's going on? But I want to make sure.
Yeah, so the understanding is that we will revisit this next month. Is there,
what
do I need to provide for reconsideration? Just the rest of, I mean, it's one other section of fence. Is that not something that we could have?
We'll give you notice as to when the next meeting will be. Roy is going to look into that back fence and probably send somebody out to take a look at it. And then he'll advise you as to whether or not you need to amend your application or not. Does that sound correct, Roy?
Yes, sir. And what we'll do is just have you mark up the site plan if it's required.
Right.
Okay. And was that something we'll be receiving a phone call from the city? Will we get something in the mail? How should
it'll be email from me.
Okay.
I have one question. This is Sarah Alexander, Ryan's wife. Regarding just to clarify the 2002 comment, so or we could see that, or Mr. Kaysen, I believe, made a comment that he could see that the fence was existing there at 2002, but we're not exactly sure what the policy was or what the variance request was then at that time. Is there going to be some sort of clarification on that, or is the onus on us to look and see what was the policy in 2002 to get with the previous owners? I just want to make sure I mean, we're happy to request the variance, but only if it's needed.
Don't worry about talking to the previous owners. I don't think that'll be required. Roy is going to check and first to see if the fence is in compliance. If it's in compliance, you won't have to do anything except, and we'll just come back and consider what we were going to consider today. If it's not in compliance, he'll tell you what you need to do.
Well, and once again, that would only be a consequence is if it had not been repaired more than 50% since that date.
That's right.
Which seems very unlikely.
Right. Okay.
Okay, tracking. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Council members, any future items you'd like to see on the agenda? Shalane, you can weigh in on this as well, please, if there's anything you'd like to see.
I'll let you all go first, and then I do have a couple of things.
All right. I mean, other than hearing our normal stuff, is there anything you'd like to see on the agenda?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I previously held an executive session to provide some legal advice and guidance to our board members. Now that we have 3 new board members, if the board finds it necessary or appropriate, I'm happy to provide that legal advice and training information to the new ones or to everybody as a whole group, so you can be privy to my legal advice. I just need to know whether you want to do that, and if so, we could schedule that for a future date.
I think it's a really good idea. If when you get your I don't know whether you got your presentation sitting in a can ready to go, or whether you need to put something together. But if you know, you let me know. We'll put it on the agenda as soon as you've got it ready and at your convenience. If you want, we can do it before the next meeting in an executive session, if you'd like.
Yeah.
Since it is
I do
legal
have
advice.
it ready. I have it ready whenever the board is ready. And
okay.
Were there minutes from that meeting, Aaron?
No, we don't typically take minutes from executive sessions. There's a certified agenda that's done for those, but I'm happy to provide, you know, the incumbent members have my previous presentation documents. My legal memo is what I provided. I can certainly provide that to the new members. And the only caveat to that is if we're going to hold executive session, I do need enough members to make a quorum.
Yep.
So that we can hold a meeting. Otherwise, not everyone would have to participate unless you wanted to be have the benefit of hearing whatever advice I give.
Okay, and we have 3 new members, correct?
Does Roy have to put out a notice of a meeting?
Yes, so you just need 72 hours notice. So
yeah, we got 3 new members, so we're going to need at least, I would suggest at least 2 of you older members to sit in on it again so that we've got a quorum. Otherwise, we got open records problems. So
I'd like to sit in on it again.
Okay, good.
I'll be there.
Okay, great. But everybody's welcome, obviously. We got to have 2 of you, otherwise we go home. Okay.
I think Jim has something to say.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jim.
At some point, we might want to look at the application again, see if we need to, make any changes to make it clearer or to get these questions answered prior to the meeting.
Yeah, let's, Roy, if you could provide us like an email. I assume at this point in time, you're probably sending these applications for variances out in an email form, along with all of its various and sundry attachments. Could you shoot that out to each of us so that we can see what they're saying, just to make sure we're treating these folks right?
Sure, I can send you the link.
Yeah,
I mean,
that'd be
they
great.
actually download it from our website. We don't send them the packet typically. We send them the link.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Just send us what you send them, so we can make sure that it's easy enough for them to see and it's clear. Because I don't have any problem being tough with variances at all, but I want to make sure that all the citizens get their due process and they know what's going on and get a fair shot. Okay. Howard, go ahead.
Yeah, and this question's for Aaron. When we have your meeting, can we discuss also getting the application changed so that these 7 items have narratives where the people can actually fill in what their response is? Can we do that in executive session?
Not an executive, unless there's a legal question associated with that particular item. I think it might be wise to go through the executive session piece of it first. Out of that executive session, then go through an open session, have a discussion about the application aspects based on what you've learned or questions that have been answered for you. It might provide you good platform.
Yeah, that's that. Any procedural stuff probably gets discussed in open meetings, unless it involves a legal question. Okay. Anybody else? All right. If there's Shalane, yes.
So yes, I do have something else. One of them, I'm glad Aaron mentioned having that holding that executive session training. I think that's an excellent idea. But I was wondering if we might, and I know we can have a short discussion about it this evening, but we certainly can't take action. I'm wondering if we need to discuss any possible change to the time of these meetings. So
yes,
right now they're scheduled for 3 in the afternoon. I know that there are at least a couple of members of the board that work full-time. And so I was just wondering if there's anyone on the board that thinks that we might need to reconsider what time these meetings start.
I do.
Yeah, Diane.
I agree. I agree totally that if it was not at 3, the mid-afternoon kind of breaks up the flow of all the different things that many of us have on our calendars, and it's still daylight too. So I would definitely be in favor of discussing a later time or earlier time. Somebody likes early morning.
Well, if we're doing it to accommodate people that are working, and as somebody that's still a practicing attorney, that I'm one of them, because if I've got to be in court someplace and I'm sorry, a district judge over these meetings is going to win, and so I would be in favor of pushing this to a later time. Is anybody opposed to it?
I would be opposed.
Okay.
Citizen
Okay.
Paul is opposed.
So I think the issue here is if we think it's worth putting on a future agenda, because we really can't vote on
That's
that
right.
today, or even take a straw vote as to like how would you vote on that later. I think this is just to get the discussion going of, is there even enough interest out there to put that on a future agenda? Probably the very next agenda would be the best course of action, I would think, if there are folks that are interested in doing that, and it sounds like we have at least a couple who are.
Yes.
And at that point in time, it becomes a majority vote, I would think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's fine. I don't have any problem with putting that on the future agenda. Aaron, how do we go about setting these agendas, and who does it? And are there any particular rules about getting things on the agenda?
So typically the items that appear on your agendas have to do with the applications for variances that have been submitted. So Roy is the person who typically puts those things together. However, he will work with you, Mr. Chairman, on any items that the board wants to have added to the agenda. Customarily, if at least 2 members of the board wish to have an item on the agenda, then the chair would grant that request and it would go on the next agenda. The chair also has the authority to have things added to the agenda.
Yep. Okay. All right. So we can get it done. Not a problem. Okay. Thank you.
Aaron, can I ask another procedural question for that? Since that wouldn't require, I don't think that would require a supermajority. Is that right? Since that's not a variance, it would.
That's right.
Like, does it even require a majority? Like, how does that even go when we're just talking about potentially changing the time of the meeting to start at 4 or 5, for example?
You would need to have a majority.
I'm worried about making sure we have a quorum as well, because to Rob's point, there will be, although I'm not a voting member, but to Rob's point, since I am working full time, should I have a meeting that is scheduled late in the day, that will have to trump this.
A simple majority is required for any action to be taken by the board for these types of items. It does not require a supermajority. And so, we would need to do that. I need to verify whether or not the time for this particular board is set by ordinance. If it is, I could prepare an ordinance so that y'all could change it if you voted to change it. And then I think that answers your questions. Was there something else?
I don't think so. I think that was it.
And last question, and this is way late in asking it, because who's responsible for taking the minutes of these meetings?
We do that with our own staff.
Okay.
Because of COVID, we're doing it from the tapes.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't supposed to be doing it. Because okay.
Several, this board, P&Z, and Building and Standards, when we have something of legal consequence, which we probably will have pretty soon, then we send those to Alice to transcribe.
Okay, great. Great, thank you. All right. Anything else? Shalane?
I'm sorry. So I had also heard that there was at some point in time, it was being considered to have some sort of like a joint meeting, or maybe it was a training, I'm not real sure, with this board and P&Z. I don't know if any of you recall that coming up previously. If so, is that anything that we need to look to putting on a future agenda? Or is that just something that would, take place offline, doesn't need to be on any sort of an agenda?
Well, that'll have to be, everybody's going to meet. Anytime more than 4 of us get together, it's got to be on an agenda. And the meeting's got to be posted. So at some point that'll come forward. I can talk with, I don't know if they have a new chairman yet. Do they have a chairman yet, Erin?
Not yet.
Okay. When they have their first meeting and get a chairman elected, then I'll give them a call and see when we can set something like that up. I assume that would be for some sort of discussion and training purposes and figuring out who's doing what, because there is some cross contamination, if you will. I think they're doing some things that we're supposed to be doing, and we'll get all that squared away and figure out who's on first.
So then maybe we would put that down then as a potential future agenda topic.
Yeah, because that would require a separate, complete agenda all by itself.
I think, Shalane, what you had heard about the joint was when Erin was originally doing this training, she did have us and P&Z all on the list. And then for whatever reason, it kind of came up as an emergency for us to have the training. And so it was just us. But there was that plan a little while ago, that joint training.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to raise that issue with the Planning and Zoning Commission at their next regularly scheduled meeting. I know that there had been some interest, and certainly there are several topics that P&Z would be the one to adopt the actual ordinances that then you guys have to interpret. And so if there's an interest in P&Z looking at the criteria, for example, the criteria for a variance, they would be the one to amend the ordinance to consider that, and then you, or at least recommend revisions of the ordinance to the council. They adopt it, then you have to enforce it. So it is certainly worth your time if this board feels that the variance considerations are something that might warrant another look. Then a cross discussion with both boards noticed as a broader meeting would be appropriate. So we can raise that, and then I'll leave it to you to coordinate with the chair, whoever that person ends up being, if Mr. Zaleski is not reappointed to be the chair.
Okay. Mr. Kaysen?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it wouldn't be faster if just try to figure out what sort of amendments we want to make to those conditions and then present that in a joint meeting with P&Z, because if we, I haven't noticed that they have a lot of impetus for changing those on their own.
You're right. I mean, that was the purpose of the joint meeting, for them to hear your concerns.
Right.
So, absolutely.
We would be better off working on it ourselves until we get ready to go to them.
That's true. And in terms of changing some of the conditions, although they're set by ordinance, I believe that ordinance tracks something else. So I'm not sure how much of a change to the conditions required for variance we really have in terms of flexibility of changing that.
But there There's more embellishment there than there is in the Texas Local Government Code.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Quite a bit.
And if you want to do a little exercise, go out and look at some of these other cities and towns and look at their ordinances, and you can start to see the difference, you know, and what we might be able to do.
Well, I mean, I go out and get permits and stuff all the time, and if they don't do what I want them to do or what they say they're supposed to do, I sue them. So I do a lot of that. You know, because I'm trying to get drilling permits in the middle of Trophy Club, Texas, and Arlington is challenging dealing with the PNC and city councils in those places, because when they really don't want you there. It's which I'm sure you know, but yeah, there's other things we could do, but I think that the variances, the conditions should be fairly strict. I think that these because we're not setting policy. And that was the problem that I had with the board when I was on it before, was they didn't pay any attention to them at all. They were a big property rights guy, and they said, hey, if it doesn't bother anybody else, let's let them do it. And I kept trying to make the point that that's not the way it works, pals. We're not supposed to be interpreting those laws or disregarding them. And and hell, they may have lobbied for me to be judged to get me off of the Board of Adjustments back then. I don't know, but you guys take a much more considered approach to it, and I find it refreshing. Thank you, because it's more work this way, but you do a better job. If there's nothing else, I will declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, I assume the City of Lago Vista is going to shut this thing off, right?
Yeah, we've got it.
Okay.